Hello, this is Study Coach Channel with me, Morale Bernard, and the continuation of the story, Little Men. By the way, please subscribe to Study Coach UK channel. Please subscribe. Study Coach UK channel. Please subscribe and please share. Last words were, little Ted was red in the face with his exertions by the time the bottle came and was allowed to suck the spoon after Nat had manfully taken a dose and had the bit of flannel put about his throat. So, let me continue. These first steps toward a cure were hardly completed when a great bell rang and a loud tramping through the hall announced supper. Bashful Nat quaked at the thought of meeting many strange boys, but Mrs. Bear held out her hand to him, and Rob said, patronizingly, "Don't be afraid, I'll take care of you." 12 boys, 6 on a side, stood behind their chairs, prancing with impatience to begin, while the tall, flute-playing youth was trying to curb their ardor. But no one sat down till Mrs. Bear was in her place behind the teapot, with Teddy on her left and Nat on her right. "This is our new boy, Nat Blake. After supper, you can say how do you do. Gently, boys, gently." As she spoke, everyone stared at Nat and then whisked into their seats, trying to be orderly and failing utterly. The Bears did their best to have the lads behave well at mealtimes and generally succeeded pretty well, for their rules were few and sensible, and the boys, knowing that they tried to make things easy and happy, did their best to obey. But there are times when hungry boys cannot be repressed without real cruelty, and Saturday evening, after a half-holiday, was one of those times. Dear little souls, do let them have one day in which they can howl and racket and frolic to their heart's content. A holiday isn't a holiday without plenty of freedom and fun, and they shall have full swing once a week, Mrs. Bear used to say, when prim people wondered why banister sliding, pillow fights, and all manner of jovial games were allowed under the once decorous roof of Plumfield. It did seem at times as if the aforesaid roof was in danger of flying off, but it never did. For a word from Father Bear could at any time produce a lull, and the lads had learned that liberty must not be abused. So in spite of many dark predictions, the school flourished, and manners and morals were insinuated without the pupils exactly knowing how it was done. Nat found himself very well off behind the tall pitchers with Tommy Bangs just around the corner and Mrs. Bear close by to fill up plate and mug as fast as he could empty them. "Who is that boy next the girl down at the other end?" whispered Nat to his young neighbour under cover of a general laugh. That's Demi Brooke. Mr. Bear is his uncle." "That's a queer name." "His real name is John, but they call him Demi John because his father is John too. That's a joke, don't you see?" said Tommy, kindly explaining. Nat did not see, but politely smiled and asked with interest, "Isn't he a very nice boy?" "I bet you he is. Knows lots and reads like anything." "Who is the fat one next him?" "Oh, that's Stuffy Cole. His name is George, but we call him Stuffy because he eats so much. The little fella next Father Bear is his boy, Rob. And then there's Big Franks, his nephew. He teaches some and kind of sees to us. He plays the flute, doesn't he? Asked Nat as Tommy rendered himself speechless by putting a whole baked apple into his mouth at one blow. Tommy nodded and said, "Sooner than one would have imagined possible under the circumstances. Oh, don't he though? And we dance sometimes and do gymnastics to music. I like a drum myself and mean to learn as soon as ever I can." "I like a fiddle best. I can play one too," said Nat, getting confidential on this attractive subject. "Can you?" And Tommy stared over the rim of his mug with round eyes full of interest. "Mr. Bear's got an old fiddle, and he lets you play on it if you want to." "Could I? Oh, I would like it ever so much. You see, I used to go round fiddling with my father and another man till he died." "Wasn't that fun?" cried Tommy, much impressed. "No, it was horrid. So cold in winter and hot in summer. And I got tired, and they were cross sometimes, and I didn't get enough to eat." Nat paused to take a generous bite of gingerbread, as if to assure himself that the hard times were over. And then he added regretfully, "But I did love my little fiddle, and I miss it. Niccolo took it away when Father died, and wouldn't have me any longer, 'cause I was sick." "You'll belong to the band if you play good. See if you don't." "Do you have a band here?" Nat's eyes sparkled. "Yes, we do. A jolly band, all boys. And they have concerts and things. You just see what happens tomorrow night." After this pleasantly exciting remark, Tommy returned to his supper, and Nat sank into a blissful reverie over his full plate. Mrs. Bear had heard all they said, while apparently absorbed in filling mugs and overseeing little Ted, who was so sleepy that he put his spoon in his eye, nodded like a rosy poppy, and finally fell fast asleep, with his cheek pillowed on a soft bun. Mrs. Bear had put Nat next to Tommy, because that roly-poly boy had a frank and social way with him, very attractive to shy persons. Nat felt this, and had made several small confidences during supper, which gave Mrs. Bear the key to the new boy's character, better than if she had talked to him herself. In the letter which Mr. Lawrence had sent with Nat, he had said, "Dear Joe, here is a case after your own heart. This poor lad is an orphan now, sick and friendless. He has been a street musician, and I found him in a cellar, mourning for his dead father and his lost violin. I think there is something in him, and have a fancy that between us we may give this little man a lift. You cure his overtasked body. Fritz help his neglected mind, and when he is ready I'll see if he is a genius or only a boy with a talent which may earn his bread for him. Give him a trial, for the sake of your own boy. Teddy." "Of course we will," cried Mrs. Bear as she read the letter. And when she saw Nat, she felt at once that whether he was a genius or not, here was a lonely, sick boy who needed just what she loved to give, a home and motherly care. Both she and Mr. Brer observed him quietly. And in spite of ragged clothes, awkward manners, and a dirty face, they saw much about Nat that pleased them. He was a thin, pale boy of 12, with blue eyes and a good forehead under the rough, neglected hair, an anxious, scared face at times, as if he expected hard words or blows, and a sensitive mouth that trembled when a kind glance fell on him, while a gentle speech called up a look of gratitude, very sweet to see. Bless the poor dear. He shall fiddle all day long if he likes, said Mrs. Bear to herself, as she saw the eager, happy expression on his face when Tommy talked of the band. So after supper, when the lads flocked into the schoolroom for more hijinks, Mrs. Joe appeared with a violin in her hand, and after a word with her husband, went to Nat, who sat in a corner watching the scene with intense interest. Now, my lad, give us a little tune. We want a violin in our band, and I think you will do it nicely. She expected that he would hesitate, but he seized the old fiddle at once and handled it with such loving care. It was plain to see that music was his passion. I'll do the best I can, ma'am, was all he said, and then drew the bow across the strings, as if eager to hear the dear notes again. There was a great clatter in the room, but as if deaf to any sounds but those he made, Nat played softly to himself, forgetting everything in his delight. It was only a simple Negro melody, such as street musicians play, but it caught the ears of the boys at once and silenced them, till they stood listening with surprise and pleasure. Gradually, they got nearer and nearer, and Mr. Bear came up to watch the boy, for as if he was in his element now. Nat played away and never minded anyone, while his eyes shone, his cheeks reddened, and his thin fingers flew as he hugged the old fiddle and made it speak to all their hearts the language that he loved. A hearty round of applause rewarded him better than a shower of pennies when he stopped and glanced about him, as if to say, I've done my best. Please like it. I say, you do that first rate, cried Tommy, who considered Nat his protégé. You shall be the first fiddle in my band, added France, with an approving smile. Mrs. Bear whispered to her husband, Teddy's right. There's something in the child. And Mr. Bear nodded his head emphatically, as he clapped Nat on the shoulder, saying heartily, You play well, my son. Come now, and play something which we can sing. It was the proudest, happiest minute of the poor boy's life when he was led to the place of honour by the piano, and the lads gathered round, never heeding his poor clothes, but eyeing him respectfully and waiting eagerly to hear him play again. They chose a song he knew, and after one or two full starts they got going, and violin, flute and piano led the chorus of boyish voices that made the old roof ring again. It was too much for Nat, more feeble than he knew, and as the final shout died away, his face began to work. He dropped the fiddle and turning to the wall, sobbed like a little child. "My dear, what is it?" asked Mrs. Bear, who had been singing with all her might and trying to keep little Rob from beating time with his boots. "You are all so kind, and it's so beautiful. I can't help it," sobbed Nat, coughing till he was breathless. "Come with me, dear. You must go to bed and rest. You are worn out, and this is too noisy a place for you," whispered Mrs. Bear, and took him away to her own parlour, where she let him cry himself quiet. Then she warned him to tell all her troubles and listen to the little story with tears in her own eyes, though it was not a new one to her. "My child, you've got a father and a mother now, and this is home. Don't think of those sad times anymore, but get well and happy, and be sure you shall never suffer again if we can help it. This place is made for all sort of boys to have a good time in, and to learn how to help themselves and be useful men, I hope. You shall have as much music as you want. Only you must get strong first. Now, come up to nursery and have a bath, and then go to bed. And tomorrow we will lay some nice little plans together." Nat held her hand in his, but had not a word to say, and let his grateful eyes speak for him, as Mrs. Bear led him up to a big room, where they found a stout German woman with a face so round and cherry that it looked like a sort of sun, with a wide frill of her cap for rays. "This is Nursery Hummel, and she will give you a nice bath, and cut your hair, and make you all comfy, as Rob says. That's the bathroom in there, and on Saturday nights we scrub all the little lads first, and pack them away in bed before the big ones get through singing. Now then, Rob, in with you." As she talked, Mrs. Bear had whipped off Rob's clothes and popped him into a long bath tub in the little room opening into the nursery. There were 2 tubs, besides foot baths, basins, douche pipes, and all manners of contrivances for cleanliness. Nat was soon luxuriating in the other bath, and while simmering there, he watched the performances of the 2 women who scrubbed clean night-gowned and bundled into bed 4 or 5 small boys, who, of course, cut up all sorts of capers during the operation and kept every one in a gale of merriment till they were extinguished in their beds. By the time Nat was washed and done up in a blanket by the fire, while Nursey cut his hair, a new detachment of boys arrived and were shut into the bathroom, where they made as much splashing and noise as a school of young whales at play. Join me for the next episode, the next part of the story, the next video. Join me for the next video of Little Men. I'll see you then. Bye.